It's funny you use that word. I'll get back to that, but carry on.
The book I was reading last night is about plots. It like just outlines like it says like we really only have 20 different plot structures for all of the stories that we tell.
20.
So I'm going through all of them, and the one I was reading last night is mystery.
Okay.
And it was basically saying that mystery is a riddle. It's just in story form instead of like a couple of one-liners, right?
I can see that.
And it's just about it's a story about what's happening.
Yeah.
And another story at the same time about what appears to be happening.
Yeah. I can see that, and in some sense, you can almost ascertain the strength of a story is in its complexity, right? The more complex the conflict is, the more complicated it seems, the more people are like, okay, I need to try and solve it. So I never thought of it that way though. And there's only
you're engaged in the story in a different level.
True.
Right? Because you're now like the sleuth.
True.
Detective.
True enough. That's pretty stellar. I like that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's an interesting book. It really breaks it down to and then I start watching movies. I'm like, oh, this is a whatever. This is a tragedy, or this is a an adventure movie, or a revenge movie. I was reading about revenge movies last night.
Intriguing.
Or revenge stories, I should say.
What's the name of the book? Do you remember?
20 Greatest Plot Structures or something like that.
I'd be intrigued to hear. Again, because I think we live in a culture that values storytelling. Through movies, through
especially
novels.
now.
Yeah. And
Oral
I think
history needs to be captured.
Right. Or the ability or art of even conveying it too, right? Because there's, I mean, I'm thinking of teachers who are conveying information, right? And perhaps one of the best assets they could have in their repository is being able to bring something that seems mundane come to life, especially if you have a story to tag it onto and say, here's how this could be enriching.
So we work a lot in the Indigenous community, and a lot of times when youth go to ask an elder a question, the elder won't give them an answer to the question. The elder will tell a story.
Okay.
And you take out of that story what you want to take out of that story and apply it to your situation.
Okay.
It's very cool, and that art of storytelling, as you said, is fading, but I know in the Indigenous community they're starting to bring it back, so I'm very happy.
That's really cool. And also, it seems there's a lot more awareness of the cultures, the indigenous cultures especially, that perhaps wasn't given a feature before.
Yep.
That enables people to be a little more, how can I say, maybe not sensitive, but more cognizant. Yes.
Things I think when they're told orally and the feelings behind it, there's a much more understanding than reading it just out of the book, because you're probably missing the emotion in it.
Yeah, you're limited to your media. But I feel like storytelling is a big thing in media nowadays, because I think that's what people are wanting to hear more, like social media, like their news stories.
Yes.
In which case, I was remembering, this is probably a year ago now. It was when we were having our elections here. So was that a year ago or a year and a half? I forget. The writer I was with, he said, because I asked him, what do you think is the most important thing in a leader, a political leader? And I think he was saying the charisma. And I said, from my vantage point, I would probably choose something different from charisma, because charisma, or the ability to influence people because of the way you present something, it can be dangerous if you don't know how to analyze the main message, right? So you could take something and make it look really good, especially in the way you're telling a story. But if you don't have a way of actually analyzing, saying, but here's what the real heart of your message is, and if you're not able to find what that is and say, but is that really solid, then you might find yourself signing up for something and going down a trajectory that you might find out after the fact, oops, maybe that wasn't the most helpful way forward. So from my vantage point, charisma is really helpful. Being able to tell stories is amazing, but I think even more so the ability to critically assess and say, what is really being said here, and how are we interpreting that, and how can we sort of engage those ideas even as they're being dressed up, right? So, yeah.
Speed and red light camera in 300 meters. Speed limit is 50 kilometers per hour.
I would say the storytellers today, especially if they have a platform, will do pretty well because they can capture it's capturing the imagination, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, the interest that way. So
Okay.
you work with the Indigenous, you were saying, sorry, Jerry. The question I was wondering is, how well received are you as you work alongside them, especially being that you're Caucasian, and from my understanding there's a certain suspicion perhaps that they have of outsiders who are coming alongside?
We've been very lucky,
Okay.
Yes.
but we've also taken the time to educate ourselves before we've gone in. We've taken Aboriginal awareness courses. Well, I guess they've probably changed it now. That's what they used to call it. It's probably Indigenous. And we took the course through the
UFC.
U of A.
U of A.
Okay.
On Indigenous Canada.
Yeah.
And they appreciate that.
Yeah.
But we also we want to learn, so like we'll let them teach us whatever they want. Like we've been very lucky. We have got to take part and witness ceremonies that typically
White people
don't get to. And it's such an honor. Like they've actually kind of considered us honorary.
Yeah.
It's funny. Like there was one thing we were recording drummers in the backyard to shoot a video for, and when they showed up, they're like, "What do you mean we're going to record in your backyard?" And I'm like, "Look, man, this microphone is really cool, but I don't want resonation, and it's going to be perfect out here." And he was really upset with me. But I'm like, hey, you guys, if you want to do a ceremony beforehand, we can do that. And they had a tobacco ceremony, and then Buddy was like, okay, so you're into this. This isn't, you're not just putting me here because it's easy for you. You're actually doing this because it's the right thing to do. And it was, once they understand you respect their culture, there's a huge difference to that. It's like a huge difference.
So it's almost like earning the right to be a part.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. And when we don't understand something, we will ask them. And so to teach us so that we don't make a mistake. And they like that. Especially the elders.
Yes.
Like we have an honorary cookum, which is grandmother, and she tells everybody, she's like, those are my adopted grandchildren, and she loves to teach. Like she's taught us how to make bannock and everything, like and tell her stories. It's so I find in our culture we don't have as much of a respect for elders as we should, and I really like that they're like, no, like we do everything with our elders, and like if there's a meal, they eat first, we serve them, and I love that there's that connection. Like I lost out on that with my grandparents because that wasn't
featured.
So
that's really cool. So from your time spent with them, if you were to have the audience of most in the community that doesn't have that access, what are like the top, say, 3 things you'd say these are things to help you be able to interact, communicate, and connect with the Indigenous in this community that you may not be aware of?
Oh, first off, man, just be aware that they're a different culture and they have different ways of seeing things and different ways, like the treaties that were signed. Okay, so like Treaty 8 was signed. The Indigenous people thought, of course we'll share all this with you. Yes, this will be great. We'll both be prosperous together, and this is what we do. Where the colonial people thought, I can't believe these stupid people are signing over all this land for like some beads and some tobacco. Holy crap, this is so easy.
I see.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's that. So you have to understand, whenever you're talking to an Indigenous person, that first and foremost has to be there. Secondly, man, if you have a chance to take a look at the 60s Scoop and residential schools, take a look at it. There's a great little documentary that Holly Fortier has put out from Fort McKay about 3 girls that were taken from there and what happened to those people. One of them happened to be her grandmother, her mother, sorry. So it was really interesting to see that story and how having her mother taken away, how it affected her, and how she was brought up and how she brought her children up. And very cool to see that.
Yeah.
And then just be open to stuff. Don't be like, what the hell are they doing? Be like, hey, so what are you doing over there? Is this something that I can be involved in? Can you share with me? Don't show me. You're going to share your culture with me. Everything is shared, right? So,
which is what they had premised from the very beginning.
Exactly. Share everything. Everything is shared. So they're not going to tell you their knowledge. They're going to share it with you in hopes that you're going to share back with them, right? And that's what it's all about.
And we've also taken the stance of we have made it our priority to mentor the youth.
Yes.
So and there's 3 main groups up there that we work with.
Okay.
We have been mentoring students to take over this, to do it themselves.
Yeah, so it'll be Indigenous people telling Indigenous stories. And that's kind of what we're hoping that we can do, and that'll be kind of our legacy, is what we want to be able to do. So. But for every 10 you teach, you're going to have 3 that stay, right? So.
Well, this business isn't for everybody, and that's the same with any kids. So.
Yeah, no, share. Just remember to share, man. That's all it is. If you're going to go in specifically to ask them a question, bring something with you, right? So.
And there are elements of hospitality / gracious engagement with neighbors.
Oh, exactly. Like if you're going to deal with a First Nations group, bring in what the elder you're going to go talk to, bring them an offering of tobacco. And you can buy ceremonial tobacco online, and it is expensive.
But it depends on where they're from.
Right?
We have a remote community that's about, an hour's flight.